Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon to the Jordan Schnitzer Family Foundation lecture. We are indebted to Jordan Schnitzer for funding this programming for the IFPDA and our audiences. Many of you know Jordan, but I looked at his first name and thought of all the things that I know about him. So J is for joy, O is for original, R is for risk, D is for delight, A is for amazing, and N is for always embracing the new. And that is what Jordan Schnitzer is. I don't know if many of you know that there is a Wisconsin printmaking mafia. Printmaking in Wisconsin is actually #1 in the United States. And through that is how I have gotten to know Bud Shark, the master printer at Sharks Inc. Bud was born in Devils Lake, North Dakota, and received his BS from the University of Wisconsin, Madison, and an MA at the University of New Mexico, Albuquerque. After 4 years in London printing for Editions Electo and Petersburg Press, he returned to the United States, where he founded Sharks Inc. It is primarily a lithography studio, but they also embrace many other techniques and enable artists to do them. He relocated the studio to Lyons, Colorado in 1998. Since 1976, Bud has collaborated with a distinguished group of more than 160 artists from around the United States and Europe, and these prints are in major museums throughout the United States and abroad. This afternoon, he will introduce the artist Enrique Chagoya and his wife, Cara Maria, to discuss their collaborations. We are honored to have you all, and we look forward with great joy to the talk. Thank you very much.
Before I give Enrique your award, I just want to mention, and I'm glad that you mentioned Bud Shark and Barbara and Roseanne. I want to talk about over the last, I think, maybe 20, 25 years, we've had such a wonderful partnership with Sharks Inc. And it's a model of the artist, the printer and publisher, and the patron. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the amazing work you've done, the relationship we've developed personally, professionally, and the work you do is extraordinary. And it was through Bud Shark and Sharks Inc. that I first heard about and saw Enrique Chagoya's work and loved it. We now have 57 works of yours. We've had 5 solo exhibitions of his work the last 15 years. We've had him in probably 30 other museums. We have you in a show called Art of Food now, which started at the University of Arizona in Tucson. Andy Schultz is the VP of all the art programs there, and it's an extraordinary exhibition that's traveling to 4 other museums. And right now, we have your work, a solo exhibition in Pendleton, Oregon. Most of you probably haven't heard of Pendleton, Oregon. It's a small town in eastern Oregon, mainly wheat farmers, some cattle. They converted a Carnegie Library to the Pendleton Art Center about 15, 18 years ago. We've had 5 shows there. Roberta Lavador, gutsy curator. She's done Louise Bourgeois, John Baldessari, Ellsworth Kelly. But right now, the show of yours, which ended today, town of 14,000, we had 2,000 people see your work. We brought in ranchers, all the school kids from grade school and high school, okay, and she did an extraordinary job curating it the way it was laid out and so forth. Now, if we could have a show of your work in New York and get 15% of the population there, but anyway, it's a joy for me to have your work. I just find such delight in it. Your work just takes me on this mythical dream with all your figures and themes, and I feel honored to be able to share your work with such diverse audiences around the country. So to celebrate you today, we have a special award for you, and I'm glad Thurman Statham just walked in. When we thought about what to give the Jordan Schnitzer Lectures and Art Prize, obviously giving you a print didn't seem like the right thing to do. And you know, you go through those fulfillment catalogs and you see all that drecky sort of stuff that, oh my gosh, you get it home and you say, now where do I put this? But I reached out to my friend Thurman Statham. Come on up here a second. He's in Omaha, one of the top 10 glass artists in the world, and I asked him if he would do us the honor of creating wonderful awards for our winners. And could you just take 1 minute and talk about your creative inspiration in the houses and ladders that you do?
Hi, how are you? Thank you, Jordan, for creating the format to be able to do this acknowledgement, and in learning about his work, which I should know more about. I was just totally inspired. You know, I work in glass and I build stuff and I print on glass, and I didn't really want to be known as a trophy maker. But you know what? This is fantastic. The show is fantastic. You are fantastic. Thank you, you know, and I'm just so honored to be able to give this to you.
Thank you, everybody. This is a nice surprise for me. Thank you, Jordan. I was not even expecting any of this. It was already a treat for me to be here just talking. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for the award. We're going to put it in a very, very nice place in our house. Love it. Thank you so much. So we better start so we don't have people waiting. Thank you.
I just want to start by talking about Enrique Chagoya, who makes paintings and prints about the changing nature of culture. We began making prints together in 1997, and Enrique is a professor of art at Stanford University, and his work is in many museum collections, including the Met, MoMA, and the St. Louis Museum of Art. And I also want to enter Cara Maria, who's a painter. We started working together in 2004. She has shown her work around the country, most recently in the Italian-American Museum in San Francisco and the De Sasset Museum in Santa Clara, California. So how should we talk about this?
Well, maybe we should start saying how we met. That was in Boulder. I was having a solo show exactly in 1998, and I was showing some of my big drawings, some prints, and one-of-a-kind books based on Pre-Columbian books, codices painted. Bud approached me with the idea of making a lithographic codex. And I thought that was impossible because I did lithography as a student, and lithography is very, very difficult. And the paper I use for my books is handmade paper by indigenous people in Mexico, by the Otomi indigenous people, and it's made with a bark from a local native tree. It's called amate. It's a relative of the fig family trees, and it's not flat. The paper is very, very uneven, and I thought Bud was out of grounds. He didn't know what he was going to deal with. I thought, I don't think that's possible. And a year later, I went back. I did a print then on Coso paper. It was more like a transparency. We printed in both sides, and that was just one experiment. But next year, I came back just to make the first codex. And I was with mouth open when I saw that he was able to do it with perfect registration. I didn't know how he did it, which is one of the mysteries of printmaking for me. That's what attracts me from printmaking, because since I was a kid, I didn't know how prints were done. And when I began to learn about how they were done, that was magic. And this experience with Bud printing the lithographs on very difficult paper was the same way. I didn't know how he did it. Then he explained to me, can I share the secrets?
Yes, yes, you can.
So, well, he had to calendar the paper 6 times. So that means runs through the press 6 times because the paper stretches like about a quarter to half an inch. And if you don't do that before you print every color, you miss registration. So it's just a very labor-intensive project. So once he did that, we began to do a project every year. A lot of friends from the Bay Area were doing work with him, like Hang Liu, who was a very dear friend of all of us. Hang Liu passed away just about a year ago. She had a big solo exhibition at the Smithsonian Museum. And she was making lithographs also with Bud all the time. So when we went to Bud, we saw his guest book, and we were making fun of our friends, making cartoons. Maybe I was making fun of everybody else. Other friends like Donald Hardy, the tattoo artist, was also visiting there. And Manuel Ocampo was a Filipino painter who was going there. And at the time, all of us were living in Oakland or Berkeley. And so we were called the Gang of Four. So I made cartoons of all of us for the guest book with Hang and other friends. But it feels like family when I visit Bud in Colorado. It's the most gorgeous print studio. And I don't know if you're going to show slides of your studio, but
No, I didn't.
it's with the mountains of the Colorado mountains in front of the studio, with Mount Audubon in the background, wildlife going all around, from deer. Cara was really afraid of the bears that happened.
There was a bear.
A bear. I'm sorry, a bear. Bear, not bears. Bears that wander around between the house and the studio at night, and Cara had to work with a little bell, tingly, so in case there was an emergency, or probably will be the bear doing that. Bring more artists. But so anyway, going to Bud's place with Barbara Shark and Roseanne as well, and all the team, Eva now doing the printing, it feels like visiting family this time. And even more when even my better self, Cara, also is doing prints there. So all this to say, it is not an experience where you go and you feel like you are doing work. You are visiting a beautiful place where the difficult thing is to work, because otherwise you will be just enjoying the wildlife and wandering around the mountains. And it's very quiet at night. That's maybe for contrast with New York City. It could be a little tough to handle if it's too quiet. You hear yourself breathing in the guest room. But anyway, and then we're going to show some images, but I don't know if you want to say something about your prints and your connection to Bud before.
Well, I mean, I met Bud the same way Enrique did, basically, and through Enrique visiting, because Enrique prints with Bud every year, pretty much since they started working together. So he has many, many, many prints. I made a lithograph with Bud in 2004, which I will show. And then I just made another lithograph this year, so 2022. And that one is in the Sharks Inc. booth right now. So it's very, very special for me, like a rare experience and fantastic. And Enrique forgot to mention that when you work at the press, maybe he said this, but you're staying, like the press and their home are in the same property. And so you're staying in their home. Barbara is cooking amazing food for you. And it's like just sort of like an artist residency, only it also results in a print project. So we can go ahead with the images.
Okay, so I'm going to start with maybe talking about very few images here. So just to talk a little bit about the ideas about the work. And maybe I should start with, let's see if can I just start with this maybe? This is one of the codices, the last of the codices we did. And this one is called Aliens in Borderlandia. And it's about a wall. In the last few years, you hear all these xenophobic stories of people crossing the border, people talking about the wall. And for me, walls are the most serious. Border walls for me are invisible, not physical, but borders between people, borders that are across ethnicities, religions, social classes, genders. There are so many borders that we don't see, but they are so real that they go beyond the political borders, the geographical borders. And I decided to put people with their eyes everywhere, in both sides of the border. It's really hard to see here because it's projected, but in one side, the blue of the sky is lighter, and the left side is darker. It's like night and evening. And in the right, there are ethnic stereotypes of non-European characters behind the wall, and in front is more European characters, or stereotypes of them in front. And on the left, they are in reverse. The European characters are behind the wall, and the non-European characters in front. I have a couple of artists that you might recognize a little bit. It's one of my favorite artists, Philip Gaston, on the right. And you'll see mostly his forehead. And Diego Rivera on the lower left. Everybody else is just from different places. You might recognize some Picasso, but this is another one, a print on a mate paper with an indigenous Mayan character. And this is recent. This is about, again, the same xenophobic stories that keep happening and people crossing the river. But a lot of people crossing the border now are not even Spanish speakers. They are indigenous population, Mayan, some of them. So for me, this is a tribute to indigenous cultures that have been in this continent before anybody. They are, in a way, the ancient Americans that populated the whole continent. And a lot of my work has to deal with issues of questioning what is an alien, quote unquote. What's the history of humanity in terms of humanity moving from one place to another, beginning with the southern horn of Africa, all the way to Europe or Asia, the different species of humans that we all have genes from them, either the Neanderthals or the Homo sapiens or the denizens from Asia, all together somehow have immigrated from one place to another, to a point where all of our DNA is totally mixed from different places. So the question of borders and people don't getting along with each other comes to my mind when I see my own DNA, because I am like 51% Native American, like 38% Spaniard, the other 10% I'm Jewish, Ashkenazi, I have Arabic, I have it's from Northern Africa, I have Southern Asian and Eastern Asian, and it's amazing that my genes get along with each other in my blood. Otherwise I will be dead. Yeah. So sometimes you wonder if your genes, all of us have some mixed genes within ourselves. If our genes get along within ourselves, why don't we get along with each other? So that's basically the point of questioning. I don't have answers necessarily. It's mostly questioning with my work. So let me see. So in this one, I'm just blowing up the stereotypes. So this one is everyone is an alienígeno. I use the word alien, but in Spanish it's alienígeno. And it has stickers with eyes. There are three-dimensional eyes. It's really hard to see here. But I have one European, African, Mexican, and other Asian stereotypes all blowing up. This one I did it during COVID, the shelter in place. And it's the 7 Deadly Sins based on James Ensor. It's really hard to see, but the first one on the right is greed, upper right is greed. And I was gonna put Donald Trump, but I'm sick and tired of his face. So I did avatars. I did use these avatars, but Donald Duck and Richie Rich with the Nazi character on the bottom. So the first one is greed. The next one is pride with a mirror, with a skull. Then the next one is anger with a little girl. Then on the left is envy with Richie Rich on the left, and the right with the skull on the Fox News is sloth. Then lust on the left. That's almost like a replica of an answer. And then on the right is gluttony, like an Aztec character. An Aztec character is having a little bit of a cannibal scene there. And this other one is an appropriation of a painting by Charles Weimar. He's a German artist whose original name is Karl Weimar. And this is a painting. The original title is the daughter of Daniel Boone's daughter being kidnapped by the Indians, painted in 1853. So I replaced it more for a more positive artistic representation or self-representation of Native Americans, rather than the representations of anger and cruel indigenous people that Charles Weimar was doing in his original painting. So it's very hard to see here, but it says Border Patrol on the canoe. It's with red letters. It's really hard to see. Then this one is the one you could see in the art fair. It's called Codex Itreville. And Itreville means liberty backwards. So if you read the words in this codex, everything is backwards. I don't know if I could even read the text from where I'm seeing. So you will read epoch, but backwards is hope. Efil is life. Simednap is pandemic. And that reveal is libertad in Spanish. Again, voy, evol, I is I love you. And then itin retarf, that's fraternity. Raw is war. And Loro, il no, only world. And so I'm going to read from right to left instead, because it's easier. Itilauki is equality. Then Imonoselabol is global economy. Then art history, world history. Noivilbo is oblivion. Icarcomed is democracy. And then Igoloportna Fo Museum is Museum of Anthropology. I love that one next to this KKK character. And so I'm not going to read the whole thing. At the end, I ask you, are you lost? Don't follow me. I am lost too. So that's the thing. Anyway, I spoke too long already. But thank you for listening. And if you want to see that print in person and try to read it, it helps. I am a little dyslexic, so it kind of helps me to read it better. So anyway, so here's Kara talking about her own.
Okay, so that is the lithograph that I just made with Bud Shark, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit about it in the context of the other work I do. I'm not a qualified printmaker, so I only get to make prints when somebody offers to help me make prints, and I've only made 2 lithographs in total, and both with Bud, and so this is the second one. And I make paintings that are kind of similar to this print, so they're very abstract looking, especially when you're far away, but then when you get up close, there's a representational element that's relatively realistically painted. In the paintings especially, I use a very, very tiny brush, and I wear jeweler's glasses, and I get right in there and try to get like every feather, make it just as real as I can, in contrast to the abstraction, which for me is like a human-created world as opposed to the natural world that the animals would have been living in if we didn't come in and pretty much mess everything up. So my current body of work is very much about the environment and about endangered species. And in this case, this is a lark bunting, which is the state bird of Colorado, which also happens to be endangered, which sounds really like, oh, that's weird, but actually it's not, because as you probably know, if you ever turn on the news, which I'm sure you do, like so many things are endangered, so many species are dwindling, including birds, including insects, every kind of animal all over the planet, Colorado being no exception to that. So I thought that was interesting, and that's why I decided to include the lark bunting in here, but it gives you just a little bit more context. And then when I made this, I spent a really long time painting on the mylars to make the plates, to make the print. So fortunately, the University of Colorado at Boulder has an exhibition of work from Sharks Inc. up right now, and they actually included the mylars from my print alongside the print so that you can see them, because they're kind of like almost their own artwork unto themselves. And I'm not sure about the order of these slides. I mean, I included it in what I sent, but I haven't seen it in here. There's a detail of the work so you can see the bird a little bit more up close. And then, here. This is the mylar. So it gives you an idea. It's just one of, gosh, how many plates did I make? Maybe like 10, 12. I did there were a lot. And I painted them in my studio in San Francisco and then shipped them to Bud and then, went there to print. But it gives you some idea of the inner workings of that. And then this is just a few earlier print projects. In 2005, Enrique and I traveled with Bud and Barbara to Hawaii to a smaller version of Sharks Inc. Press, where we made some monoprints. And so this is just an example of some of those prints from the time. And the way I made them was cutting all these shapes out of pieces of mylar and then putting ink on them and running through the press multiple times so you get the layering effect of the images. It's another one. And then this was my 2004, my first lithograph that I made with Bud, which doesn't have any animals in it that are realistically rendered, but it does have birds of prey and military aircraft camouflaged into the print, because at the time that's what I was painting into my other paintings. And this one has some fluorescent pigment and silver, and it comes with 3D glasses so you can see it special from across the room. And I think that was my last slide, of my work.
Because one thing I wanted to say also about the experience more than the print itself, the experience of eating the best food you could have in the area with Barbara, who wrote a cooking book. It's really fun. I've been making tamales with Barbara, and then she made tamales herself. And I told her the tamales she did was like my grandmother's tamales. And that was the best compliment I had to her, to her cooking, I guess. But it's just one of these elements where there is something that it's not something you could learn from just looking at the prints, the environment where you make them. There is a connection between art and context. And sometimes the context bites, actually, I have to say. And do you mind if I say the story? Like when one of my codices got destroyed in Colorado, because there was an exhibition of Bud's prints. It was called the Ink of Sharks Ink. And he put one of my codices, which was a critique to the Catholic Church for their sexual abuse, for the sexual abuse of children and women, nuns, etc. But also the hypocrisy of being against same-sex marriage, being very militant against birth control, and so on. So I made something about how something get corrupted in the institution. So I mixed icons with soft porn images all over. And I thought it just looked kind of funny because I like sense of humor. And somebody got very, very offended in 2010 in the town of Loveland in Colorado. and they decided that the whole work was used an offense to religious beliefs. I had the honor of having a review at Fox News, and they blur pages of my book as if there was nudity, as if it was sex happening. There's no sex happening, nothing. The thing is, what it almost gave a heart attack to people was the fact that I mixed a religious icon with pictures of pornography. So you might see a virgin or Jesus or whatever, but their body didn't belong to each other. The bodies were more like Mexican comic book pornography. That's what it was. So somebody got really offended with a review of Fox News. Somebody drove all the way from Montana to Loveland with a crowbar. She was a truck driver. Went to the exhibition with a crowbar, destroyed the codex. The codex is called The Misadventures of the Romantic Cannibals. And then I thought, wow, what a great publicity, you know. I should invite this person to come to all my openings. I'll have a lot of news. I've made it to the New York Times front page. But the thing is, nobody told this person that this was a multiple original. It was a print. It was like 29 other copies besides the ones he destroyed. So it only when the price went up for the rest of 29 other lithographs. But then it got really scary. It got really scary. Death threats. That's just, you know, that 2010 is when what today is like the law of the land, all the death threats. Anybody who dares to say anything about anything, just get your death threats. That started very hard with all of us. They ask a local pastor to picket my exhibition, or Bud's exhibition, because mine was just one among many other works, a group show. But the pastor of this local congregation talked to me. He asked me what my work was about, and I explained to him, Pastor Jonathan Wiggins. I told him, this is about the scandals, the sexual abuse from the church and the hypocrisy, their homophobia, and how misogynist they are, who are, you know, against abortion. They are constantly even against a family planning, and it's just insane. And I told him, I'm not religious, but I just wanted to say something about it. But I'm not trying to offend anybody. I work with religious people in literacy campaigns. I have many religious friends, so I'm not trying to be a bigot. So he liked my explanation. He said, thank you for your thoughtful explanation. If you ever come to Boulder, it will be an honor to meet you. And I wrote back to him, I wish most Christians were like you. So we became instant friends. Well, he got death threats because he didn't join the picket line. His house was put online to be attacked, and he got really, really scared. He had to have a detail to protect him, and I got death threats. I have to call the police at Stanford. They were advising me how to behave on campus. They flagged my neighbors across the street. Thankfully, I have great neighbors all around me, but it got really, really scary. There was a time when you just are worried about who is driving in front of your house. So it got really scary. Bud and Barbara got also targeted with their address. It was just terrible, but it has a very happy ending. Few weeks after the whole thing started, they forgot about us because there was another exhibition of gay and lesbian artists in Washington at the Smithsonian, the Hide and Seek exhibition. The same group that boycotted our exhibition went to boycott the exhibition in Washington, and they forgot about us. And then things got calm, and the pastor asked me, hey, will you do a painting of Jesus for my church? And I wrote back to him, you know, I am not religious. And I thought to myself, but you know, he risked his life just, you know, for defending my work. So I said, well, but if your congregation accepts a painting from me, the devil? Sure, I'll do it. And then I didn't say the devil, but a non-religious person. So he read our emails to the congregation and they accepted. So I had to do a Jesus painting, and I did a Jesus painting, a resurrection. They loved it. They sent it to them. They put it high up in their church, and then I thought that was the end of it. But the dangerous thing is when they invited me to go there for the reception, for the opening reception. That got really, really scary. I didn't want to go. I said, they're going to kill the pastor and me in the same place. They're going to have a two-first. But because I go every year with Bud, I say, I'm going to have to take responsibility for my own art. And I accepted. I didn't want to go with Bud. I didn't want to go with Cara. I went by myself. They put me bodyguards. I felt like a rock star. I talked to their congregation with like 800 people. I was just looking where to run if I had to, but nothing happened. It was beautiful. Nobody tried to convert me into Christianity. Nobody talked to me about God, Jesus, nothing. They just wanted me to introduce me to their congregation, to their pastors, their families. We had a great reception. And then the director of the museum, the Loveland Museum, Susan Eison, she stood her ground against all these protesters. She defended our work. She kept it. And she got so many donations for her museum. She got thousands of dollars, enough to buy an etching press and open a printmaking classroom in the museum. And they began to teach printmaking classes in the museum. So I never expected in my life to have this kind of dialogue with a community that was outside of the art world. And it made the most incredible impact in my own career. I don't think I ever had an experience like that. I wonder if Bud ever had something like that, but it was my favorite exchange. Susan Eison now is in the City Council of Loveland. She oversees the museum. She got promoted. And the pastor and ourselves, we are friends. Sometimes we have lunch with the pastor and with Susan all together. So all together happened thanks to a print through Bud. That's what I wanted to say. Whether or not you enjoy it, that's a different story. But thank you. So we're open for questions, I guess, if anybody has any questions.
Anybody who wants to ask any questions or ask about?
Hey, thanks for sharing that story. I was just wondering if you, in the years since that all occurred, have you made any pieces of work that sort of reflected on that sort of open dialogue with the pastor or with the congregation or anything like that?
Well, I keep doing anything that crosses my mind, basically unapologetically, but I learned something from that experience, which is the context is something that might or might not accept my artwork. And I don't want to self-censor, worry about the context. Because the same work that could be completely ignored and invisible in one context, in another context is very subversive. And you could see across, not only in this country, but just across the world. There was, in Iran, about maybe 10 years ago, I remember the story of an artist, this woman artist who got censored by the Ayatollahs, and they told her that she shouldn't paint whatever she was painting, but only roses. And what happened is suddenly all the galleries began to show roses as a protest. And I thought that was amazing. That was really good. But roses then became subversive there. They were a protest, but roses here, or they will mean nothing. So that's what I learned from this experience. The context somehow finishes the art, maybe in ways that the artist was never expecting. And in that sense, it doesn't make any point to worry about what the content of the work is going to be or what is not going to be. There is no point in self-censorship, because as long as you know that the context where you show your work, it has enough freedom to show anything that goes through your mind, then you don't have to worry about it. And I'm too used to think whatever I want to think. Sometimes I have to stay quiet because I don't want to offend people. But I have a terrible sense of humor. I offend people with my sense of humor sometimes, but I grew up in a place like that. My family is full of bullies with humor. They attack each other with humor, and if you don't laugh, you lost. So you have to come back. I have a little nephew who was like 4 years old, and he was in a war of who was uglier with my brother-in-law. You look like a car crash. No, you look like an extraterrestrial bacteria. And finally, the little kid told him, and you look like a painting of my uncle Enrique. And so that's where I'm coming from, that kind of monsters like my family, but I love them. And so sometimes I express that through my artwork. And obviously, some people didn't get it, and because it's a different context. So I hope I answered your question, but with it, yeah, great.
Anyone else? Anything? Yes.
Jordan.
What artists influenced you and you looked up to that helped shape your ideas? And what art do you have in your home?
Oh, that's two very good questions. I like most artists who have sense of humor. There was a local artist in the Bay Area who influenced me that I barely knew was Robert Arneson. Robert Arneson is the one who did the sculpture for Moscone, for the Moscone Art Center, and the mayor of San Francisco at the time, Dianne Feinstein, didn't like it. She said, it was too irreverent because he embedded a gun and shots and all of that. And that's his work. That was the way he worked, with humor. And the first time I saw his work with sculptures, with the funniest self-portraits I have ever seen, and I like that sense of humor. And one thing I went through, especially in art school, was that you were forbidden to do anything with humor. If you do figurative art, it better be with non-narrative, so let alone political. I'm talking about the early 80s. That's when I was in art school. And this artist was doing the opposite. So I felt, well, I'm going to bring back my background on editorial cartooning, because I did a lot of editorial cartooning. And a lot of my works, actually, I see them as editorial cartooning more than high art. I love editorial cartooning. And cartoonists influence my work, especially satirical artists. Goya, of course, is one of my major influences. I love his surreal, critical perspective on all kinds of things, from war, the disasters of war. Especially was the first time I tried to do a forgery, quote unquote forgery, with I put just Ronald Reagan in one of his little demons. But other artists like Katie Kolowitz really influenced me, because she was so powerful. I remember crying in front of her engravings when she has a woodcut of a mother with her dead son, sort of like a piedad. So she was, and I look woodblock printing at the time, so she was fantastic. But anyways, there's a lot of artists that influenced my work. Mexican editorial cartoonists like Naranjo and Elio Flores, who made these surrealistic political cartoons. I really like them. But at home, I don't want to brag. We have all kinds of things. I have trade art. So we have Kara Walker lithographs. We have a lot of prints. We have Richard Tuttle, like one square, right on top of a print by a cardboard, Andy Warhol, the soap box. And then we have a little Louis Bourgeois next to our sofa. We have, you gave us a print by Peter Saul. So we have them that says, look what our critics did to me, with a piece of his brain missing. Anything that has that sense of humor. We have some photography by Saido Keita on our mantle, or by Graciela Iturbide, this Mexican photographer who's a good friend of ours. Okay, we have our work. We have Cara's paintings in the living room. I have one of my paintings. I have the slot machine from 2012. We have the soup cans in our kitchen. The ones I did, cannibals.
Hung Lu.
What is?
Oh, in our bedroom. So we have this gorgeous monoprint by Hung Lu, made at Paulson Press, and it's gigantic. And that's like at the front of our bedroom. Like when we wake up, that's what you see. And it's this woman at a huge loom, and there's all these like birds and dragons and all these things like flying through the sky. So that's a gorgeous piece.
And also we have the woodcut by the erotic Japanese
Masami Teraoka.
Masami Teraoka. So we have Masami Teraoka with an octopus, and and then we have a lot of really crazy folk art, just a lot of skulls. I mean, all kinds of skulls. I have glass skulls, red ones, transparent, different kinds, paper mache. After Posada, replicas of Posada with the skull, the dogs, a Katrina, the skeleton, all of that. We had
Mexican masks, so dance masks.
Dance masks, but
Mexico.
for real dance, from like archaeological museum masks. We have them hanging around. I have some pre-Columbian things that are mostly replicas, I have to say, but they look like the thing. And few actual pre-Columbian sculptures that some friends of mine gave me some long time ago. So it's
eclectic.
Very, very eclectic mix of things.
Paper mache. There's this family in Mexico City, the Linares family, and it was like the grandfather, the father, the sons, and they make they're paper mache, but very, very elaborate and finely done. So they're these sort of, it's like Posada, but in paper mache form. So there's like Katrinas, there's all these characters, dragons, monsters, and they're all really, really finely painted and just, I don't know, very cartoony. So we have a bunch of pieces of theirs as well.
And last party we did in 2019, because we used to do parties of end of the year for New Year's party. We have like about 100 people in our house. And at the end, all of our prints, and they were crooked. Our collection, they were dumb. We haven't done more parties lately.
The last great party.
That was the last party. That was the end of the world before the pandemic. So, anyway, too long. So, as I say, maybe too much bragging. But.
Good question, though. Thank you. Anyone else? Anything? Okay.
I think we already over-explained ourselves. So thank you, everybody, for
Thank you very much.
listening to us. Thank you.